There is a quiet shift that happens in the body somewhere around midlife. It does not announce itself with pain or drama. It arrives instead as something more subtle, a slight hesitation when rising from a low chair, a carefulness on stairs that was not there before, a sense that the body no longer rebounds from exertion the way it once did. Most people interpret these small changes as simply aging, the inevitable wearing down of a structure that has served its purpose. But this interpretation, however natural, misses something essential about what is actually occurring beneath the surface. The body in its fifth decade and beyond is not merely declining. It is adapting. It is responding to conditions, to signals, to the materials it has been given. The question that rarely gets asked is whether those conditions support what the body is trying to do. The quiet mistake most people over 50 never realize they are making is mistaking the body's adaptation to poor conditions for the inevitable trajectory of aging itself. What follows is an exploration of what the body actually needs to continue its work of maintenance and renewal, and why the difference between adaptation and decline often comes down to what we understand about the body's quiet, persistent intelligence. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging, the architecture of vitality, understanding how the body maintains itself through time. There comes a moment in midlife when the body begins to speak in a different language. Not the urgent language of acute illness or injury, but something quieter, a shift in how recovery feels after exertion, a change in how morning light reaches the eyes, a new awareness of what was once taken for granted. For many, this moment arrives somewhere in the fifth decade, though its timing varies as much as fingerprints. This change is not failure. It is not breakdown. It is simply the body continuing its ancient work of maintenance, but now with different resources and different priorities. Understanding what happens during this transition and what supports the body through it transforms the experience from one of loss to one of informed partnership. The body that carries us through midlife is the same body that carried us through youth, but it has been shaped by everything that has come before. Every meal, every movement, every restful night, and every sleepless one has left its trace. The body remembers, and in its remembering, it continues the same processes it has always performed: building, maintaining, repairing, adapting. What follows is an exploration of how these processes work, what supports them, and how to recognize the body's quiet signals about what it needs. This is not a protocol or a prescription. It is an invitation to understand the architecture of vitality, the structures and systems that allow the body to continue its work through all the seasons of life. The body's continuous renewal. The human body in middle age is not the same physical substance it was a decade earlier. Through the process of renewal that operates constantly beneath awareness, cells have been replaced, tissues have been remodeled, and the very matter of the body has turned over many times. The skeleton that supports movement today contains calcium that was not present 5 years ago. The blood that carries oxygen was manufactured in recent weeks. The skin that feels the morning air is newly formed. This renewal is not magic. It is biology, predictable, observable, and responsive to conditions. Cells divide according to genetic instructions, but they build with whatever materials are available. Tissues repair according to blueprints encoded in DNA, but the quality of repair depends on the signals they receive from their environment. The body in its wisdom does not distinguish between what is consumed and what is experienced. Food becomes building material. Movement becomes instruction. Rest becomes permission to repair. Every input carries information that shapes how the body conducts its endless work of maintenance. This perspective shifts the question from what is breaking down to what does the body need to continue its work. The body does not stop building just because a certain birthday has passed. It builds differently, with different priorities. but it builds nonetheless. The question is whether it builds with adequate materials and appropriate instructions. The foundation of structure. Bone has served as the body's structural framework for the entirety of human existence. Yet only recently has its dynamic nature been fully appreciated. For centuries, bone was viewed as a scaffold, static, unchanging, merely supportive. The reality is far more interesting. Bone is alive. It breathes. It responds. It adapts to the demands placed upon it with a precision that engineers might envy. When force passes through bone, cells detect the strain and respond by reinforcing the areas under load. When force diminishes, those same cells gradually reduce the density of areas no longer needed. This is not deterioration in the usual sense, it is efficiency. The body does not maintain what it does not use. This principle operates throughout the skeleton, but its effects become most visible in later life. The person who remains physically active maintains bone density in the areas where force is applied. The person whose activity declines experiences gradual reduction in areas no longer stimulated. Both are following the same biological rule. Use it or lose it. But more accurately, use it and it will adapt to meet demand. The process of bone renewal involves two specialized cell populations working in coordinated opposition. Osteoblasts build new bone tissue, laying down a matrix of collagen that will later be mineralized. Osteoclasts break down old bone tissue, removing areas that are damaged or no longer needed. This pairing ensures that bone remains both strong and light, strong enough to bear weight, light enough to allow movement. In youth, building outpaces breakdown. The skeleton grows denser and stronger, reaching its peak somewhere in the third decade of life. From that point forward, the balance gradually shifts. Breakdown begins to slightly outpace building, leading to a slow decline in density that continues throughout life. For women, this shift accelerates dramatically when estrogen declines at menopause, because estrogen has been restraining osteoclast activity for decades. Understanding this process changes how we think about bone health in later years. The goal is not to reverse the inevitable or to return to the densities of youth. The goal is to support the body's remaining building capacity so that breakdown does not outpace formation more than necessary. It is about managing the slope of decline, not eliminating it entirely. The materials of construction. Bone requires specific materials to perform its building work, and these materials must be available in forms the body can use. The list is longer and more interesting than the simple calcium for bones message that has dominated public understanding for decades. Calcium receives the most attention, and rightly so. It provides the hardness that allows bone to bear weight without collapsing. But calcium alone cannot build bone any more than bricks alone can build a house. The structure requires a framework, a binding agent, and a variety of specialized materials for different purposes. The framework is collagen, a protein that forms a flexible mesh throughout bone tissue. Collagen provides tensile strength, the ability to bend slightly under pressure rather than snapping. Without adequate collagen, bone becomes brittle, like chalk rather than like the composite material nature designed. The calcium crystallizes within this collagen framework, creating a structure that combines flexibility with compressive strength. Building collagen requires specific amino acids, the building blocks of protein, which must come from the diet. It also requires vitamin C, which serves as a cofactor for the enzymes that stitch collagen molecules together into functional fibers. Without vitamin C, collagen production falters, and the bone matrix becomes disorganized and weak. Once the collagen framework is in place, mineralization can begin. This process deposits calcium phosphate crystals within the collagen mesh, hardening the structure while preserving its flexibility. But calcium does not travel directly from food to bone. It enters the bloodstream first, and from there it must be directed into bone tissue. This direction requires vitamin K2, a nutrient that activates proteins responsible for binding calcium and transporting it into bone. Without adequate K2, calcium may remain in circulation longer than ideal, potentially depositing in soft tissues where it does not belong. The same calcium that should strengthen bone can, in the absence of proper direction, contribute to arterial stiffness instead. Vitamin D performs a different but equally essential function. It increases the efficiency of calcium absorption from the digestive tract, ensuring that dietary calcium actually enters the bloodstream where it can be used. Without vitamin D, even generous calcium intake may pass through the body unabsorbed. Beyond these primary players, a range of trace minerals contribute to bone health in specialized ways. Magnesium supports the conversion of vitamin D into its active form and helps regulate the cells that build and break down bone. Zinc serves as a cofactor for enzymes involved in bone matrix synthesis. Copper helps cross-link collagen fibers for proper structural organization. Manganese activates enzymes required for the organic matrix that surrounds bone cells. Boron, required in tiny amounts, influences how long hormones remain active in bone tissue. Each of these materials must be present for bone to form properly. A deficiency in any one can limit the effectiveness of all the others. This is why focusing on a single nutrient, no matter how important, rarely produces optimal results. The body builds with whatever is available, and the quality of construction reflects the completeness of the material supply. Sources and their wisdom. The human diet has evolved over millions of years, and the body's nutritional needs reflect this deep history. While isolated nutrients can be extracted and supplemented, whole foods provide these materials in combinations that reflect their natural relationships. Dark leafy vegetables offer an instructive example. Kale, collard greens, and spinach contain calcium, magnesium, and vitamin K together, in a matrix that includes fiber and other compounds that influence how these nutrients are absorbed and utilized. The body encountering these nutrients together, in the context of a whole food, processes them differently than it would process the same nutrients consumed separately as supplements. Dairy products from grass-fed animals provide calcium along with magnesium, phosphorus, and vitamin K2. The K2 content depends on the animal's diet. Grass contains vitamin K1, which animals convert to K2 and concentrate in their milk and fat. This natural combination reflects the body's need for coordinated nutrient delivery. Cruciferous vegetables supply calcium, magnesium, and vitamin C, along with sulfur-containing compounds that support detoxification pathways. Reducing toxic burden may indirectly support bone by lowering inflammatory stress, which can accelerate bone breakdown when chronic. Legumes provide magnesium, zinc, and copper along with protein for collagen synthesis. The phytates they contain can reduce mineral absorption, which is why traditional preparation methods like soaking and sprouting have persisted across cultures. These practices are not arbitrary. They reflect accumulated wisdom about making nutrients available to the body. Nuts and seeds concentrate multiple minerals in small packages. Sesame seeds, particularly when ground, provide calcium, magnesium, zinc, and copper in forms the body can use. Almonds offer similar benefits with a different mineral profile. Pumpkin seeds concentrate zinc especially well. The pattern that emerges is not about single superfoods, but about diversity. Different foods provide different combinations of nutrients, and consuming a variety ensures that no single nutrient becomes limiting. This is the wisdom encoded in traditional diets across cultures, not a conscious understanding of biochemistry, but an evolved pattern of eating that supported health through generations. The signal of load. Nutrients provide the materials, but they do not provide the instructions. The body needs to know where to build, how much to build, and when building is complete. These instructions come primarily from mechanical load, the forces that pass through bone during movement. This principle, sometimes called Wolff's Law after the 19th century surgeon who described it, operates continuously throughout life. Bone adapts to the demands placed upon it. Areas under regular load receive reinforcement. Areas under reduced load gradually lose density as the body reclaims materials for use elsewhere. The mechanism involves bone cells that detect strain through physical deformation. When bone bends slightly under load, osteocytes, the mature cells embedded in the mineral matrix, send signals that recruit osteoblasts to the area. These builders arrive with materials and instructions, reinforcing the bone in the direction of the applied force. This is why weight-bearing activity matters so much for maintaining bone density. Walking sends force through the legs and spine, signaling those areas to maintain their structure. Running sends greater force, signaling greater need for reinforcement. Resistance training sends force through muscle attachments, signaling the need for reinforcement at those specific points. The signal must be sufficient to be detected. A gentle walk that feels comfortable may not generate enough strain to trigger significant reinforcement, particularly if the body has adapted to that level of activity over years. Progressive loading, gradually increasing the force applied, keeps the signal strong enough to maintain the building response. For those who cannot tolerate high-impact activity, resistance training offers an alternative. Lifting weights places tension on bone through the muscles that attach to it. This tension signals reinforcement just as impact does, though through slightly different pathways. The key is that bone must be challenged beyond its accustomed load to trigger the building response. Balance also matters. Bone responds specifically to the direction of applied force. Walking stimulates the legs and lower spine, but does little for the arms and upper body. Upper body resistance work stimulates the arms, shoulders, and upper spine, but does little for the legs. A comprehensive approach addresses all major skeletal regions through varied activities. The question of hormones. Hormones serve as the body's chemical messengers, coordinating activity across distant tissues. Several hormones play particularly important roles in bone maintenance, and changes in their levels with age influence how effectively the body conducts its building work. Estrogen has received the most attention in this context, and for good reason. Throughout reproductive years, estrogen restrains the activity of osteoclasts, the cells that break down bone. When estrogen declines at menopause, this restraint lifts, and bone breakdown accelerates. The rate of loss during this period can reach 2 to 3% annually, compared to less than 1% before menopause. This acceleration is not disease. It is the body responding to changing hormonal signals in the way it always has. The question is not whether this change occurs, but how the body adapts to it. What resources are available for building? What signals are present for directing those resources? And what other factors influence the balance between formation and breakdown? Testosterone plays a similar role in men, though its decline is more gradual than the menopausal transition in women. Men lose bone density with age as well, just more slowly on average. The mechanism is similar. Declining sex hormones reduce the signals that restrain breakdown, shifting the balance toward net loss. Other hormones influence bone through different pathways. Parathyroid hormone regulates calcium levels in blood by controlling release from bone when dietary calcium is insufficient. Chronically elevated parathyroid hormone indicates that the body is struggling to maintain blood calcium, potentially pulling from bone stores to compensate. This can happen when calcium intake is too low, when vitamin D is insufficient for absorption, or when kidney function impairs activation of vitamin D. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, affects bone when chronically elevated. High cortisol suppresses osteoblast activity while stimulating osteoclast-mediated breakdown. This is why long-term use of corticosteroid medications increases fracture risk, and why chronic psychological stress may influence bone through similar pathways. Thyroid hormone regulates metabolic rate throughout the body, including in bone. Excess thyroid hormone, whether from overactive thyroid or excessive replacement medication, accelerates bone turnover and can increase fracture risk. The relationship is complex, but the principle is clear. Hormonal balance matters for bone because hormones coordinate the activities of building and breaking down. The terrain of inflammation. Inflammation serves a necessary purpose in the body. It is the response to injury or infection, the process by which immune cells arrive to clear debris and initiate repair. Acute inflammation is protective, essential for survival. Chronic inflammation is different, a low-level activation that persists without resolution, wearing on tissues over time. Chronic inflammation affects bone through multiple pathways. Inflammatory molecules called cytokines stimulate osteoclast activity directly, accelerating breakdown. They also suppress osteoblast activity, reducing formation. The combination creates a net loss that can accumulate significantly over years. Sources of chronic inflammation vary widely between individuals. Diet plays a role, particularly diets high in refined carbohydrates and certain types of fat that promote inflammatory signaling. Excess body fat, especially around the abdomen, produces inflammatory cytokines continuously. Chronic infections, gum disease, and autoimmune conditions all contribute. Even sleep disturbance can increase inflammatory markers. Addressing inflammation supports bone indirectly but meaningfully. Dietary patterns rich in vegetables, fruits, and omega-3 fatty acids from fish or plant sources tend to reduce inflammatory signaling. Regular physical activity, in appropriate amounts, has anti-inflammatory effects. Adequate sleep allows the body to resolve inflammation that accumulates during waking hours. The relationship between inflammation and bone illustrates a broader principle. The body's systems are connected in ways that cannot be ignored. Supporting bone requires supporting the whole organism because bone does not exist in isolation. It is part of a body that includes immune cells, fat tissue, digestive organs, and nervous system, all communicating constantly through chemical signals. The digestive connection. The gut and the skeleton may seem distant, but they are connected through the essential function of absorption. Nutrients cannot support bone if they cannot enter the bloodstream, and absorption depends on digestive health. Stomach acid provides the first step for mineral absorption. Calcium, particularly from supplements in carbonate form, requires acid for dissolution. As people age, stomach acid production often declines, reducing the ability to extract calcium from food and certain supplements. This is not universal. Many older adults maintain adequate acid production, but the trend exists. The small intestine absorbs minerals through specialized transport proteins. These proteins respond to vitamin D, which is why vitamin D status influences calcium absorption so strongly. They also respond to the presence of other nutrients. For example, vitamin C enhances iron absorption, and certain amino acids enhance calcium absorption. The large intestine hosts bacteria that influence mineral availability indirectly. These bacteria ferment fiber that escapes digestion in the small intestine, producing short-chain fatty acids that lower pH in the colon. Lower pH increases the solubility of calcium and magnesium, potentially allowing absorption that would not otherwise occur. Some bacteria also produce enzymes that break down compounds binding minerals in plant foods, releasing them for absorption. This is why fermented foods have been valued across cultures. Yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, and similar foods provide both bacteria and the substrates they need to support digestive health. The relationship is symbiotic. Humans provide food and habitat for bacteria, and bacteria provide services including support for mineral absorption, fiber from vegetables, fruits, legumes, and whole grains feeds these beneficial bacteria while also providing vitamins and minerals directly. The fiber that reaches the large intestine becomes fuel for bacterial communities that produce compounds supporting overall health, including bone health through reduced inflammation and improved mineral absorption. The protein question. Protein has received less attention in bone discussions than calcium, but it deserves equal consideration. Bone is approximately 1/3 protein by weight, and the collagen framework that gives bone its flexibility requires continuous amino acid supply for maintenance and repair. Older adults often consume less protein than younger adults. Appetite changes, dental issues, cost considerations, and cooking challenges can all reduce protein intake. This reduction occurs at a time when protein needs may actually increase due to reduced efficiency of protein utilization, a phenomenon sometimes called anabolic resistance. The timing of protein intake matters as much as the total amount. The body cannot store amino acids for later use the way it stores fat or carbohydrates. Consuming protein in a pattern that provides relatively consistent amino acid availability throughout the day supports continuous tissue maintenance. This might mean approximately 25 to 35 grams of protein at each meal, rather than a small breakfast, modest lunch, and large dinner. Sources of protein vary in their amino acid profiles. Animal proteins from meat, fish, eggs, and dairy provide complete profiles with all essential amino acids in proportions similar to human needs. Plant proteins can be combined to achieve complete profiles: beans with rice, hummus with whole wheat pita, peanut butter with whole grain bread, but require more attention to variety. Collagen has received specific attention in recent years, with supplements marketed for joint and bone health. While collagen supplements can provide amino acids, the body synthesizes its own collagen from whatever amino acids are available. Whole protein sources provide the full spectrum required for all tissues, and the body directs amino acids where they are needed. The influence of medication. Modern medicine has extended life and reduced suffering through countless interventions, but medications can have unintended effects on bone. Understanding these effects allows for informed decisions and, when appropriate, discussions with healthcare providers about alternatives. Medications that reduce stomach acid, prescribed for heartburn and reflux, can affect calcium absorption. Proton pump inhibitors like omeprazole and similar drugs significantly reduce acid production, potentially limiting the absorption of calcium carbonate. For individuals taking these medications long-term, ensuring adequate vitamin D and considering alternative calcium forms may be appropriate. Corticosteroids, whether taken orally or inhaled at high doses, affect bone through multiple pathways. They suppress osteoblast activity, reduce calcium absorption, and increase calcium excretion. Even short courses at high doses can accelerate bone loss. Inhaled steroids for asthma or COPD have less systemic effect, but may still influence bone at high doses over long periods. Some antidepressants, particularly selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, have been associated with lower bone density in observational studies. Serotonin receptors exist on bone cells, and altering serotonin signaling may affect bone remodeling. The clinical significance varies by individual, and the benefits of treatment must be weighed against potential effects on bone. Diabetes medications in the thiazolidinedione class increase fracture risk in women by promoting bone marrow adiposity at the expense of osteoblast formation. Alternative diabetes medications may be preferable for those with osteoporosis risk, though individual circumstances vary. Aromatase inhibitors, used in breast cancer treatment, reduce estrogen production dramatically. For women taking these medications, bone protection becomes a priority because the hormonal signal that restrains breakdown has been nearly eliminated. The lesson is not that these medications should be avoided. They provide important benefits for the conditions they treat. The lesson is that bone health exists within a larger medical context. An awareness of medication effects allows for a more complete picture of individual risk and appropriate countermeasures. The observation of populations. Looking across human populations reveals patterns that inform understanding of bone health. Traditional societies with different diets and activity patterns show different trajectories of bone loss with age, offering clues about what supports skeletal maintenance. Populations that remain physically active throughout life, with regular weight-bearing activity integrated into daily existence, tend to maintain bone density better than sedentary populations. This is not surprising given what is known about mechanical loading, but the magnitude of difference is striking. The body designed for movement maintains its structure when movement continues. Populations with high intakes of calcium from plant sources, such as some traditional agricultural societies, maintain bone density on calcium intakes that would be considered low by modern standards. This suggests that other factors, vitamin D status, physical activity, overall dietary patterns, may be as important as absolute calcium intake. Populations with high sun exposure and correspondingly high vitamin D status show different bone health trajectories than populations in northern latitudes. Vitamin D from sun exposure differs from supplemental vitamin D in its accompanying context. Sunlight provides ultraviolet radiation that affects skin in ways beyond vitamin D production. Populations consuming traditional fermented foods show different gut microbiome profiles and different patterns of age-related change. Whether this translates directly to bone health is difficult to isolate from other factors, but the consistency of traditional practices across cultures suggests accumulated wisdom. These population observations do not provide prescriptions. They provide hints about what might matter, directions for further investigation, and reassurance that the human body can maintain bone health under varied conditions. The common thread across populations that maintain bone density into later life appears to be continued physical activity and diets based on whole foods rather than processed alternatives. The rhythm of daily life. Translating understanding into practice requires attention to the rhythms of daily life, the small, repeated actions that accumulate into patterns over years. Grand interventions matter less than consistent habits, because the body responds to what it experiences regularly. Morning light deserves consideration for its role in setting circadian rhythms that influence hormone patterns, sleep quality, and ultimately the conditions under which bone remodeling occurs. Light exposure early in the day signals the body to align its internal clocks with the external world, supporting the hormonal rhythms that coordinate tissue maintenance. Movement throughout the day matters more than a single exercise session. The body designed for frequent, low-level activity throughout waking hours responds differently than the body that sits for hours and then exercises intensely. Brief movement breaks, standing, walking, stretching, provide ongoing mechanical signals that may support bone better than a single concentrated dose. Meals provide opportunities for nutrient delivery, distributing protein and minerals across the day rather than concentrating them in one meal supports continuous availability for tissue maintenance. Including vegetables at multiple meals ensures varied phytonutrient intake and provides fiber for gut bacteria. Rest allows repair to occur. Sleep is not passive. It is an active state during which the body conducts maintenance that cannot happen during waking hours. Growth hormone, which supports tissue repair including bone, is released primarily during deep sleep. Disrupted sleep means disrupted repair. The rhythm that emerges is not complicated but requires attention. Move regularly. Eat varied whole foods. Get light exposure. Sleep adequately. These are not novel prescriptions. They are descriptions of how human bodies have always functioned when allowed to operate as designed. The question of supplementation. Supplements occupy an uncertain place in bone health discussions. They can provide nutrients that are difficult to obtain from food, but they cannot replace the complexity of whole foods. They can address specific deficiencies, but they cannot provide the full range of compounds that foods contain. Vitamin D supplementation is widely recommended for older adults because sun exposure declines with age and skin synthesis becomes less efficient. For many, maintaining adequate vitamin D status requires supplementation, particularly during winter months or at northern latitudes. The amount needed varies by individual, which is why testing can be helpful for determining appropriate intake. Vitamin K2 supplementation may benefit those who do not consume adequate amounts from food. Fermented foods and certain animal products provide K2, but dietary patterns low in these foods may leave gaps. The negative 7 Malawian Quachas form, derived from natto and other fermented soy products, remains active in the body longer than other forms and may provide more consistent support for calcium direction. Magnesium supplementation may be appropriate for those with low dietary intake or conditions that increase magnesium requirements. Magnesium status is difficult to assess through standard testing because most magnesium is inside cells, not in blood. Signs of low magnesium include muscle cramps, fatigue, and irregular heartbeat, though these are not specific to magnesium deficiency. Trace mineral supplementation requires more caution because the margin between adequacy and excess is smaller than for major minerals. Zinc, copper, manganese, and boron can all be supplemented, but they compete for absorption and can create imbalances when taken in isolation. Food sources provide these minerals in ratios that reflect biological relationships. The principle guiding supplementation should be: identify what is missing, then consider whether supplementation is the appropriate way to address the gap. For some nutrients and some individuals, food sources alone may be insufficient. For others, dietary adjustments may be more appropriate than supplements. Individual circumstances, dietary patterns, and laboratory results all inform this decision. The integration of approaches. Bone health emerges from the integration of multiple approaches, not from any single intervention. Nutrition provides materials. Movement provides instructions. Hormones provide coordination. Rest allows repair. Each supports the others, and none can substitute for the others. This integration explains why isolated interventions often disappoint. Increasing calcium intake without ensuring vitamin D status leaves calcium unabsorbed. Increasing vitamin D without vitamin K2 may increase calcium in blood without directing it to bone. Taking supplements without providing mechanical loading through exercise may supply materials without signaling the need to use them. Exercising without adequate nutrition may increase demand without supplying materials to meet it. The integrated approach recognizes that the body is a system, not a collection of independent parts. Supporting the system means supporting all the processes that contribute to its maintenance. This requires attention to multiple domains, but the attention need not be complicated or time-consuming. Small, consistent actions in each domain accumulate into patterns that support the whole. Walking regularly provides mechanical loading. Eating varied whole foods provides nutrients. Getting morning light supports hormonal rhythms. Sleeping adequately allows repair. Each action supports the others, creating an upward spiral of mutual reinforcement. The perspective of time. Bone health unfolds over decades, not months. The interventions that support bone today accumulate their effects over years of consistent application. A single year of excellent nutrition and appropriate activity cannot reverse decades of decline. But 10 years of consistent support can maintain density and reduce fracture risk substantially. This perspective reduces the anxiety that often accompanies bone density testing. A single measurement provides a snapshot, but the trajectory matters more than any single data point. Stable density over several years, even if below the ideal range, represents successful management. Gradual decline managed through appropriate support is different from rapid decline without intervention. The body's capacity for maintenance extends throughout life. It is limited not by age, but by the availability of what it needs to perform its work. Materials must be supplied. Instructions must be provided. Rest must be allowed. When these conditions are met, the body continues its ancient work of building, maintaining, repairing, and adapting. This is not a promise of immortality or a guarantee against fracture. It is simply a description of how the body operates when supported appropriately. The same processes that built bone in youth continue throughout life, though at different rates and with different priorities. Supporting those processes through informed, consistent habits maintains skeletal integrity through all the seasons of life. The wisdom of the body. The body that has carried us through decades of life knows things that conscious mind does not. It knows how to build bone when materials and signals are present. It knows how to direct calcium where it is needed and store it for later use. It knows how to repair microscopic damage before it becomes macroscopic fracture. It knows how to adapt to changing conditions and maintain function through varied circumstances. This wisdom is not mystical. It is biological, encoded in DNA shaped by millions of years of evolution. The body's processes have been refined through countless generations, tested against the challenges that human ancestors faced across diverse environments. The body that exists today carries the solutions that worked for those who came before. The question is whether modern conditions allow this wisdom to express itself. The body designed for movement now sits for hours. The body designed for varied whole foods now encounters processed alternatives. The body designed for natural light cycles now experiences artificial illumination that disrupts circadian rhythms. The body designed for community now often experiences isolation. Aligning conditions with design does not require returning to some imagined ancestral past. It requires understanding what the body needs and making choices that provide those needs within modern contexts. Movement can be integrated into daily routines. Whole foods can be chosen over processed alternatives. Light exposure can be managed. Community can be cultivated. The body responds to these choices not with gratitude, but with function. It simply does what it has always done: builds, maintains, repairs, adapts, using whatever materials and signals are available. The quality of its work reflects the quality of what it is given. The quiet partnership. There is a partnership available between conscious awareness and the body's unconscious wisdom. Conscious mind can choose what to eat, how to move, when to rest. The body takes these choices and transforms them into tissue, structure, function. Conscious mind sets conditions. The body works within those conditions to maintain itself as best it can. This partnership does not require perfection. The body is resilient, capable of functioning through less than ideal conditions for remarkable periods. But resilience has limits, and the accumulated effects of suboptimal conditions eventually influence how well the body maintains itself. The partnership also does not require constant attention. Once patterns are established, they tend to perpetuate themselves. The habit of daily movement, once ingrained, continues without constant decision-making. The pattern of eating varied whole foods, once familiar, becomes preference rather than discipline. The rhythm of adequate rest, once normalized, becomes the body's expectation. What it requires is initial attention, the willingness to observe current patterns, consider whether they support the body's needs, and make adjustments where appropriate. This is not about fixing what is broken. It is about aligning conditions with what the body requires to continue its work. The continuation. The body continues. Through all the changes of aging. Through all the accumulated experiences of decades. Through all the variations in health and circumstance. The body continues its ancient work. Cells divide. Tissues renew. Structures maintain. The process is the same process that has operated since before birth, adapted to current conditions with the wisdom of evolution. This continuation is not guaranteed by any external force. It emerges from the body's own capacities, supported by the conditions in which it finds itself. Those conditions are shaped by choices about movement, about food, about rest, about the myriad small actions that constitute daily life. The body that receives appropriate materials, appropriate signals, and appropriate rest continues its work longer and better than the body deprived of what it needs. This is not a moral judgment. It is simply biology, as predictable as any natural process. Understanding this biology allows informed participation in the partnership. It allows choices based on knowledge rather than fear, on understanding rather than hype. It allows the calm confidence of knowing what supports the body and why. The body that has carried us this far will continue as long as conditions allow. Our role in the partnership is to provide those conditions, not perfectly, not obsessively, but adequately and consistently. The body does the rest, quietly, continuously, without needing our conscious involvement in its ancient wisdom. This is the architecture of vitality, the structures and systems that allow the body to continue its work through time. Understanding it transforms the experience of aging from one of loss to one of informed partnership with processes that have operated since life began. The single most important idea to carry forward is this. The body does not stop building just because a certain birthday has passed. It builds differently, with different priorities. But it builds nonetheless, using whatever materials and signals it receives. The quality of its work reflects the quality of what it is given. This is not a prescription for perfection or a promise of endless youth. It is simply an invitation to observe, to understand, and to participate more consciously in the partnership that has been operating quietly within you since before you took your first breath. If this reflection has stirred something worth considering, we would be honored to hear your thoughts in the comments, what you have noticed in your own body, what questions have arisen, what wisdom you carry from your own years of living, and if the perspective offered here resonates. The library contains other volumes worth exploring. Subscribe so that new wisdom finds its way to you. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.